If you have any questions for the presenters during the session, please feel free to enter those into the Q&A section at the bottom of the Zoom screen, and we will address them at the end of the talk. And on that note, I will hand it over to our presenters.
Thank you, Joanna. As Joanna mentioned, my name is Kelsey Wiest. I'm a member of our Strategic Solutions and Learning Management team. I'm thrilled to be joined by Barbara Miller, a math product specialist on our content team and the lead editor of our brand new edition of Viewing Life Mathematically. There are so many new and exciting updates to highlight in this new edition. So over the next 45 or so minutes, we'll be walking through a number of those highlights in a Q&A session, and then discussing just a few details of what the transition process looks like to move to the new edition if you're currently using the first edition. I'm planning to save some time at the end for additional questions. So if you have any throughout our discussion, please feel free to chat those into the Q&A box. And with that, I'll go ahead and get started. So Barbara, thank you for joining me today. I would love it if you could start with just giving us a quick overview of what all went into the revision process for this title.
Sure. So the revision process starts by looking at all the information and feedback we got from the first edition. And then to add on to all that feedback, we sent out surveys to instructors that are currently using the first edition and some people who are interested in first edition, but they didn't adopt for various reasons. Then we also held a few focus groups. Once we had all of that data, we organized it and prioritized it and how we want to update things. And we also started working with the author to include her own opinions on what she wanted to update and any research that she did on her own. And from all of that data, we created a plan of attack and scheduled milestones so we can hit significant things as we updated. And the whole updating process took about 2 years of work by me and the author, and I also had an editorial team helping me throughout. And with this book, basically everything has been touched and updated in some way, either from the overall design, updating exercise sets, or just adding new content or updating existing content.
That's really exciting to hear. I'm excited to dig into some of the details of what was all updated. So to start, can you give us a rundown of the new chapters and sections that are included in the title, and really just explain why we chose to include some of those in this new edition?
Yeah, so I'm going to split this into two different things, new chapters and then overhauled content where we added new content. So with the new chapters, we added a numeration and measurement systems chapter. I think basically since we released the first edition, we've had requests to add this content. So hopefully people will be happy with what we added. This chapter includes 2 lessons on early numeration systems. Then it has a lesson on the base number systems. And it ends with coverage of the metric system and US metric conversions. Another new chapter is data science, which is a new and upcoming field that a lot of people are starting to get interested in. And it could kind of be thought as an extension of the statistics chapter, since it shares a lot of the same statistical background that you'd need. And another chapter that I'm including in new chapters, but kind of can be considered an overhauled chapter, is the algebra chapter. A lot of people wanted some more algebra content in the book, and we had a chapter on growth, which was chapter 5, and that did kind of cover linear equations, quadratic, exponential, and logarithms. And so we took that content and we expanded it, and now we also have content in there about linear inequalities and systems of equations and linear programming. And then for some of the overhauled chapters, we took chapter 4, which is rates, percentages, ratios, and proportionality. We changed the title of it. And with this one, we had some significant feedback on the chapter overall, and the author saw a good chance to revise the entire chapter, change the flow of it, and now it should be more accessible to students, help them understand why all this stuff is important in their everyday life. Another chapter we overhauled is the finance chapter, which honestly is my favorite chapter in the book because I think it's very important for students. We took the content that existed and made it focus more on what students might use in their everyday life. And we also had requests to add information about federal finance and taxes. So we included a section on that. And then finally, we significantly updated the geometry chapter. It's less of a very quick, you've seen all these formulas before, now here's some examples. It shows more how all the different formulas for area, volume, surface area are used in everyday life and how students might use them. And we also expanded the coverage of right triangle trig.
Excellent, thank you. So I know you just talked through some of what we overhauled from the first to the second edition. Can you explain the expanded list of topics and some of the more significant updates you made to existing content from the first edition that I think will be of particular interest to those here who are using it?
Yeah, I think one topic that people will be very happy we included is dimensional analysis. We've had a lot of requests for that. And we even found a way to fit it into 2 different lessons in the book. It is in chapter 4, which is the rates ratios. And then we also included in chapter 7, because we saw the metric to US conversions was a very good place to introduce dimensional analysis. And I mentioned already that we included content on federal revenue taxes and all of that to the finance chapter. And if anyone doesn't want that, you can easily skip this section and there's no loss of continuity in the chapter. With the geometry, I mentioned we expanded the angles or trigonometry content and we combined it with angles in a new lesson. In probability, we added a brand new lesson on binomial probability. And in statistics, we made 2 kind of significant changes. We added a lesson on confidence intervals, which was heavily requested. And we also updated the normal distribution content. So for anyone who doesn't require their students to buy a calculator or they just don't want their students to use calculator, we included the use of tables. So they can look it up and have that alternate way to work through the contents. And then some other updates we did is we worked on the exercise sets in the books. So those are very much improved. And we overall improved the technology included.
Excellent, thank you. So can you share, this is the type of course that seems to have quite a focus on application-based learning. So can you share some of the ways we placed a renewed focus on that application-based learning in this new edition?
One of the first things you'll see if you actually read the chapter openers, we revised or rewrote all the openers so they're more closely connected to the content that will be covered and hopefully will draw the students into it and inspire curiosity. Otherwise, we have updated the existing chapter projects or created brand new ones. We have some brand new section level projects. And with the exercise sets, we have expanded those. From the first edition to the second edition, we have more than doubled the amount of application problems in the exercise sets. And that was exciting when I found out that. And otherwise, throughout the book, we looked at the examples and found ones that either were kind of straight number crunching and made them into more real life application problems, or we updated the existing ones to be more relevant to anyone who would use the book.
That's good to hear. You mentioned the expansions that we did to our exercise set in the textbook. Can you tell us just a little bit more about the exercise set and then maybe give a bit more detail on the focus on application in the exercises in the book?
Yeah, so the exercise sets in the book definitely fall into the category of new and improved. Instead of just adding new exercises, we reorganized each exercise set into 4 different distinct parts. We have concept checks, we have practice problems, we have applications, and writing and thinking. So the concept checks come in 2 different flavors. You either have fill in the blank problems or true and false questions. And those are related to the vocabulary and key concepts covered in the section. Every single lesson has a few of these now. And then after you work through those, students have practice problems, which are the general skill and drill number crunching exercises. And even though they might not be the most interesting problems you can work through, they help pinpoint some of the skills that you need to practice in isolation from an application, so you make sure the steps are performed correctly. And then nearly every single chapter or lesson has applications. Some just don't really support application problems. As you know, instructors, you probably know that some concepts, it's really hard to fit those in. But these take the skills and concepts and put them into a real life relatable context. And since it is an application-based course, we really placed an emphasis on expanding the applications, the variety of them, the amount of them. And as I mentioned before, we more than doubled the amounts of applications. So you have a lot to choose from. And then finally, each exercise set will have writing and thinking exercises. Not every single lesson has these, but a majority of them do. And these allow students to just dig a little deeper into the concepts they've covered in the chapter. With these, we expect students to write out their thoughts in full sentences and just think about the material in different ways that the practice or application exercises don't allow them to.
It's sounding like the new organization is really allowing students to sort of build on the skills and then apply, which is, I think, really what you need in a course like this. So it's exciting to hear that this organization and expansion gives faculty a lot more to choose from and students a lot more opportunity to make those connections. That's really exciting to hear. So since technology is something we touched on, I'd love to hear how we incorporated technology and updated it in this new edition.
Okay, so two major things we focused on with technology is improving the TI 8384 plus calculator instructions, and we included a lot of Excel instruction where it made sense. One thing to note is we did drop the Wolfram Alpha coverage that was in the first edition, both due to feedback and because we didn't think it was the best way to approach the material. The technology instructions are now embedded within the example solutions, and we've set up the solutions to where they're kind of a choose your own path situation. Nearly every single one of the example solutions has a by hand, which is what you would normally expect. You'll see the example set up as a student should work through it. Some of these might need some minor calculator work to just calculate the really big numbers that might happen. But these can be done with any simple calculator, even the one on your phone if you need to. And then where a TI 8384 plus calculator has either useful menu options or functions, we included a completely separate solution walkthrough that teaches the students about what these functions are, how you use them, and what you would expect as the answer. And similarly, we did that with Excel solutions. The calculator and Excel solutions, we don't include them when it's just kind of like figure out what 5 plus 7 is. It's more advanced things like stats or any of the big finance functions. And since we did have it set up to choose your own path, if you teach a course where you don't require calculator work, you can easily just ignore the rest of it. And if you want to teach a course where you really want students to have some Excel competency for future jobs, you can focus on that with the new inclusion of technology. And as I mentioned, like nearly every single example has a by hand solution. There's one significant place I can think of that we don't, and it's Excel only. And that is when students create amortization tables for mortgages, because I don't think anyone would be expected to do that by hand for like a 30-year mortgage. And then an additional thing with the technologies, we have sidebars for tech tips, which are just little tips to help students figure out how to adjust the zoom in a window, or if a menu might be a little different between different versions of calculators.
This is really exciting to hear. So it's sounding a little bit more with this edition that depending on what technologies you as instructors use in your course, that we have examples and instructions to support that in most cases, which is a huge improvement, and I'm very excited to hear that. I would love if you could just in your own words elaborate a bit on how these new additions really would be impactful for students and instructors.
Okay, so I'll start with instructors. As I mentioned with the technology inclusion, we definitely kept in mind that this type of course is different at basically any different school. Like you'll have different objectives you want to cover, different competencies. Some schools might not want to use calculator. Some schools might want to focus on Excel proficiency, and some schools might want to do a project-based course. And so we've made sure that the updates allow instructors to just tailor the course to whatever they want. It's very flexible. And then for students, we're hoping it's a much more approachable overall product, course, book. And so they can relate it to their everyday lives outside of the classroom. And we also kept in mind the very wide range of students who take this course. I used to teach it actually, and I had students who were either just fresh high school graduates, people coming back to update their college credits for any career change. And I even had some retired grandparents who were just there to refresh their memory or learn something new. So we kept all of that in mind. So all students should relate to the material presented.
It's exciting to hear. So switching gears just a little bit, I know we've talked about the question bank expansion or the exercise expansion in the textbook. And I know a lot of work went into expanding the bank of virtual questions to assign. What will some of those expansions bring to instructors and students that we made to the virtual question bank?
The main thing we focused on with the question bank and the software is to ensure that there's a complete coverage of the lesson. And with different products, we have different approaches to this. With this one, we ensured that every single example has a corresponding problem case in the software. So if you really like an example, you should be able to find something similar. And then we also looked at, are there any variations of the problem that would be good to have, any other skills that might not have a specific example, but it was covered in the text? And also if we included any really interesting new application exercises, we wanted to include that. And overall, we created over 300 new problem cases. So it's quite a big expansion for the question bank.
That's really exciting. And just to clarify, when you're saying the examples, if they were to find an example that they liked in the textbook, they should be able to find a type of question that matches that type of example from the textbook?
Yeah, it might not be the same exact wording, but it'll have the same skills and the same approach.
Great to know. And I will just say, as far as the question bank expansion in the software, with those 300 new cases that were created or questions that were created, all of those have multiple iterations, anywhere from typically 20 to 50. So it gives you a ton of variety and allows you to use them on lessons and tests. So it really does expand your available bank of questions to use in the software, which I think is really exciting. So one of the things that I'm most excited about in the second edition are those section level projects that you hinted at earlier on that are now being offered in addition to the existing chapter projects that we offered that have also, as I understand it, been overhauled quite a bit. Can you tell us more about these, how they can be used, and maybe give us an example of your favorite section and/or chapter level project?
Yeah, so this inclusion of section level projects makes me very happy. As I mentioned, I taught this course before, and I was the instructor who always made extra projects for students to work on in class. So these section level projects, we have one for nearly every single one. There's a handful that just don't support it on their own, or we combine two sections into one project. But they're designed that students could work through them in class, either as a group or individually. So that way they also work for either online courses or in-person courses. And I think I mentioned that they'll take about 20 minutes. I don't remember, but about 20 minutes. So it's a short part of your class time and allows students to just focus on key ideas or concepts that were covered in the section. So the chapter projects, they cover the entire chapter and you can't really focus in on specific things that you might want to. So these section level projects allowed us to look through the sections, pick out this is a very important thing, we want to focus on it. Or in some cases, we expanded on the section. So for the expansion idea, the one section in logic on fallacies, the section project introduces a new logical fallacy and kind of works through it. And you said I can mention my favorite projects. My favorite section project is for, I think, section 6.5, the quadratic functions. So if you've ever seen the OK Go video Upside Down and Inside Out, they're in a waitlist simulation, and that's done by going on an aircraft, and it follows kind of parabolic arcs. And when you're at the top of it, you simulate weightlessness. And to get a 3 or so minute long video, you have to kind of stitch them together, the clips of weightlessness. So in this project, students are given an equation for the arc, and they have to figure out how long are you weightless, how many weightlessness increments you would have to go through to film an 80 seconds clip for a movie set in space where you're weightless. And then kind of think of other things involved. Like if you're working on a movie, you want to minimize costs. So you want to minimize how many arcs you go through, and you have to figure out the entire setup of that, which I thought was interesting. And then to illustrate how we have a wide variety of projects, my second favorite one is in the logic chapter. Students are given a joke related to Descartes' I think therefore I am, and then you use the math covered in the section to analyze the joke. So typically analyzing a joke kills it, but for me, this makes it so much funnier because you're just analyzing whether the joke makes sense.
Those are really fun and very exciting ways to, in different ways, to apply a lot of what's being learned in this course. So thank you for sharing those. It's really exciting to hear. So this, switching gears just a little bit, we released a new edition for Viewing Life Mathematically with integrated review. And I understand that there were some enhancements that we made to the review lessons specifically in this title. Can you share some details of how those were updated to make them even more relevant and impactful for students enrolling in a co-requisite course?
Yeah, so we've had a good amount of feedback on how we've structured the integrated review lessons. And we send surveys out to instructors to get more details on what they'd like to see in the new edition. And as a result, we kind of completely restructured our approach to the integrated review lessons for the new edition. We put in a lot of time and consideration to make sure that the review chapters before the main body chapters cover all of the skills that students might be lacking on with the chapter. So like if it's a stats, just cover very basic stats. You might need percentages, things like that. And one of the significant things you might notice if you're using the integrated review is that we no longer have duplicate lessons. Instead, we took lessons, we may have split them or included a variation of it that's more focused for the chapter that's coming up. And in the guided notebook and the learn screens, we have an introduction called Making Connections. And we also have at the end a wrap-up example called Looking Ahead. The Making Connections introduction helps to answer the question students always ask of why do I have to learn this, especially if it seems just like a complete review to them. It gives them context for why they're doing it. And then the Looking Ahead example at the end shows how what they just used is going to be included in examples or new skills that they'll learn in the upcoming chapter. So when they initially see it, they might not know how to work through that example, but they'll be able to spot, hey, I just learned to do that skill again. So they'll know how to use it when they need it. And
yeah. It's all about making connections for students who are doing potentially extra content and reviewing extra material to prepare them for the credit level content. So having those making connections and looking ahead connections there for the students just to see as they're introduced to the lesson, I think will be super valuable for them. transitioning, you mentioned the guided notebook, and we do offer the integrated review guided notebook that covers the content of the integrated review lessons. Can you just, describe how you might see the integrated review guided notebook for the co-requisite courses as helpful for students to succeed if they are in a co-requisite course?
Yeah, sometimes students will look at a section of a math book and have no idea what's really important, because you might think everything's important or maybe just the examples. So the guided notebook kind of highlights what is important, and it also ensures that they read through the definitions, formulas, any other similar box content. And each section of the guided notebook takes one of the examples and it highlights that. It might be just a new key concept or something that's just a really interesting example. And it prompts the students to go to the learn screens, watch through the video with the example and kind of work through it with someone else. And then after they do that and hopefully understand it, they'll work through a very similar example on their own. Then at the end of each of the lessons in the guided notebook is a small set of exercises that just cover the key concepts and ideas so they can practice. And all of this together will help students prepare to work through the practice and certified modes of the software.
Great to hear. And it's just an extra layer of support as well, it sounds like, for the students in a co-requisite course to have a printed resource that they can use and follow along to guide them through the resources and content of the review lessons. So last question I have for you that I want to wrap up with is, I would love if you could share your favorite chapter and or lesson in the new edition and why it's your favorite.
All right, so I'm going to give two answers. I'll give a favorite new chapter and a favorite revised chapter, which I think I already gave a hint earlier about what that one will be. So my favorite new chapter is the numeration and measurement systems. I really like how this dives into the history of math. Not a lot of students at this level ever get to really experience anything with the history of math. So it's, just a new way to approach it. And when I taught this content, I didn't fully understand why it was covered, but now I have a new appreciation for all of the content in the chapter. And I enjoy the perspective that it gives to the number systems that we use in our everyday life. It just makes you think of things you wouldn't have thought of before. And then my favorite chapter revised is the finance chapter. I personally think it is one of the most important chapters for students in the book because everyone deals with money every single day and has to make financial decisions. And the revised chapter covers so many of the basic financial concepts that students interact with on a daily basis. And it covers things from budgeting to understanding what the credit card interest is, what happens if you only make the minimum payment on a credit card, and even things like taking out a mortgage and filing taxes, which we have to do every year.
Yeah, a lot of real life application for students that has been expanded and improved on. So that's really exciting to hear. Well, thank you so much, Barbara. I really appreciate you sharing all of these exciting updates and valuable information. Before we move into some Q&A time, and so before we jump on Joanna, I just wanted to cover a few things about what the transition process looks like to move to the new edition. We will still have plenty of time for questions at the end, so feel free to chat those into the Q&A box if you have any further questions about anything that Barbara went over. But I wanted to cover what the transition really looks like. So first, although it isn't required to transition to the new edition, we do hope some of the updates and enhancements that we just walked through are exciting and encouraging you to make the switch if you're using the first edition. So as a reminder, we have the following resources available for both Viewing Life Mathematically and the integrated review. For both, we offer the comprehensive online courseware platform that comes with pre-created customizable lessons to walk students through the content of your course and really hold them accountable for mastering the material. We do have the printed textbook that can be used with both the regular Viewing Life Mathematically software and the integrated review courseware as well. And we expect to be able to begin shipping printed textbooks for review out very soon. But if you are interested in taking a look now, you can actually review the text virtually by accessing it through VitalSource, which if you don't have access to it already, your training and support representative can certainly get you access to that. And then lastly, like Barbara had mentioned, for our integrated review title, we do also offer a guided notebook that pairs with the integrated review content of the courseware. And it is an excellent resource to pair with the courseware that helps students develop a more comprehensive understanding of the review concepts. So switching gears, we do often get questions about what the process to upgrade to the new edition looks like. So I wanted to make sure to cover just a few details. First, we like to make it really seamless and easy for you by really automatically copying over almost all faculty, settings, and assignments from the old to the new edition. We can really transition you over quickly, and your training specialist can take the lead on it for you to get it done. We can copy over nearly everything so that it really reduces any extra setup you have on your end. And copied items include things like your instructors, sections, custom permission settings, assignments and content, such as your custom curricula, tests and quizzes created using WebTest, offline assignments, any course materials that you've posted, custom question builder questions that you may have created. We also copy over your custom grade settings, things like your grading options, any assignment groups that you've created, lesson and test late penalties, and we copy over a lot of other custom settings like what you have defined as your letter grade, your temporary access code settings, custom display options, any assignment reminder templates you've used in the past. With all of the items that we are able to copy over, it really just leaves further customizing your existing lessons and tests to add in any of the new content you want to include, and then setting up a new lesson due date template. Barbara's already mentioned we've made a pretty vast expansion to our online question bank, so you'll definitely want to take the time to review those new questions and see how you want to add it into your course. And once you've done that, you should be ready to go within the new course. And even before we complete the copying process for you from the old to the new edition, right now you can start previewing the course on your Teach account so that you really can begin reviewing and planning for the new course. It is a good time, like I mentioned, for you to take a look at some of the new content that's available for you to assign virtually and determine if you plan to add it to any of your existing web tests and lessons. So as far as what the process looks like for your students, the first step would be just to let your support specialist know that you'd like to transition to the new edition so that we can ensure we have the information and timing we need to determine when to transition your students over to the new edition. It's typically done between terms. So if you were finishing up the summer term in late July, we transition you over to the new edition sometime in August for the fall term. So if you do have any repeater students, they don't need to create new accounts. They'll just access an upgrade button in the student portal that will allow them to automatically upgrade to the new edition. We do also ensure that you maintain access to your old gradebook and any archives you've created in the old gradebook so that you can access archived data like your students' old grades, old sections, if you ever need to access those in the future. And then lastly, before we do move into some additional Q&A time, if you would like to go ahead and get started with the process to upgrade to the new edition, please just connect with your training and support specialist, and they can start by giving you that preview access to the new edition in your Teach account if you don't already have access to it, and then discuss when we can begin the process of copying your old section settings and assignments over to the new edition. That won't happen until later this term or closer to the summer session, but we can give you access to a preview so that you can start reviewing some of that new content we added and determining how and what you want to use. The support team is equipped to answer any questions that you have throughout the transition process, which again, we try to make seamless and really easy, and we're really just happy to help however we can. So with that, it looks like we have just about 10 minutes left for questions. So Joanna, if there have been any to come through in the Q&A, feel free to share those.
We do have one question about the timing of when instructors can review. I know you mentioned that materials are available to be added and reviewed at this point where they stand currently. What if an instructor wants to view the content of the textbook? Is that available yet? Is there an ebook available yet?
Yeah, so instructors can view the textbook through VitalSource, which I mentioned. If you haven't, and we also do have it posted on a separate website too, which I think our team can send over in the interim before we have the physical ebook available that would be tied to the student portal or student platform. If you haven't accessed through VitalSource, you actually can access any of our instructor annotated editions of our textbooks through this site, and it gives you access to all of them to put in a virtual library for yourself. So that would be the place to start, is to review via VitalSource. And if you need any instructions or support on how to get to VitalSource and request access to the copy, our training team can definitely help with that. And then, like I said, as far as adding it to your Teach account, this would allow you to look at and review a lot of the new content that we're adding in, but I wouldn't advise, since we can't yet do the copy process of moving your old edition to the new edition, I wouldn't suggest making any customizations at this point. I would just use it as a tool to review some of the new content that we've added in and figure out how and when you might want to use it once we are able to copy over. Hopefully that addresses the question.
Yes, thank
Okay.
you. A few other timing questions here. Do we know if the guided notebook is physically available yet, or will that be available in the coming weeks along with the physical text?
I'm not sure. Barbara, do you know if the guided notebook has been finalized and sent to our
I believe it was
printers?
sent to print several months ago. It was one of the
Okay.
first things we sent, so it should be available.
Okay. And I don't know that we have the guided notebooks on the VitalSource, but I can jot that down and follow up. Maybe if we could jot this instructor's name down just to follow up with them directly. If it's already been sent to the printers, I would imagine we can send that out. We may just wait to send all of it together. So depending on the timing.
All right, perfect. And then are the PowerPoints available yet, or are those still in progress?
Those are still in progress. We're hoping to have them finalized by the end of the month.
That's exciting.
Thank you. And then another question here. Will this new edition be available for use in the summer, or will instructors need to wait until the fall?
My understanding that it's most ideal for the fall term, primarily because of when we might be able to start the process of copying over old sections, settings, and assignments from the old edition to the new edition. That is likely to be available closer to end of April, beginning of May, which, depending on when your summer session starts, it may not be enough time. We may still have the opportunity to support some summer sections or sessions, depending on when the summer session actually starts. So if you could connect with your training and support specialist and really just give them a few more details about when your summer sessions actually start. We'll have the printed textbook. We do already have the new edition ready. The questions have been released. If they haven't already, they will be this month to the online question bank. So all of the resources will be there. It's just a matter of timing of when we can copy things over. So as long as you communicate with your training and support specialist when ideally you'd like to start, if it's a later summer session, we can connect with you and one-on-one to let you know if that's something that we'll be able to accommodate.
All right, thank you so much. Another question here. Could you remind us of the ancillaries that are available with this new edition?
Yes, so we have the PowerPoints, we have videos and the software. That's not really ancillary, is it? I'll let Kelsey answer this because
yeah, so we do have the PowerPoint teaching slides. The chapter, I would probably consider the chapter and section level projects ancillaries as well that you can use in your course, in your classroom, outside of the classroom. I will just mention as well that this is a new thing with the chapter and section level projects. Those are actually incorporated into the textbook as well. I don't know that I can't, we didn't have the section level projects, but them being available to and incorporated directly in the text is a great thing. And we also will have answers, correct me if I'm wrong, Barbara, for each of the, well, at least the chapter level projects.
The answers are not included in the book, but we will have them available upon
Right.
request. And another thing that could be considered an ancillary is we're going to have a companions website with this. So it'll be available for students and instructors to use. It'll have any data sets that we use for statistics or data science. It'll have a couple answers that wouldn't fit in the book, like the previously mentioned amortization tables, because those are huge. And then some extra resources for students.
So it's quite a bit. In addition, and I would say that the video resources are also an extra resource for students as well, and instructors.
All right, well, thank you both for answering those questions. Those are all the questions we have for you right now. But thank you both for all of the valuable information that you have shared with us. If you do have any further questions, we can either stop by our Hawks virtual booth or feel free, as Kelsey mentioned, to connect with your specific training and support specialists. They'll be able to keep you updated on our progress as more of the different aspects of the new edition become available and walk you through that process once it is time to begin. All right, well, thank you again, both of you. Turning to our next session, it will be our keynote with Arjun Bakshi starting at 1 p.m. Eastern. You can view the chat for the session link or access the conference website for a complete list of concurrent sessions and their descriptions for this afternoon. While accessing the conference website, don't forget to stop by the exhibit hall to say hello to the Hawks team, view a quick 5-minute presentation, and be